Stories of Granny Rose. Hit another table, Mom. This one's just for the big shots. The voice of my adopted daughter, Shelby, cut right through the elegant dining room of the Gilded Spoon, one of the most exclusive spots in Billionaires Row, Manhattan. Laughter erupted at the table where my son-in-law, Grant, my teenage grandkids, and even my biological son, Ethan, were sitting. They were all cracking up like it was the funniest thing they'd ever heard. But after decades of being put down and treated like dirt, I figured it was time for a lesson they wouldn't soon forget. But before I dive in, hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from. I love seeing how far these tales travel. Seriously, tell me where you're watching from. Hit another table, Mom. This one's just for the big shots. Quote, those words, so sharp and dismissive, sliced through the chic, pricey air of the Gilded Spoon, and they came straight from my own adopted daughter, Shelby. The silence that followed was momentary, quickly broken by the table's roar of laughter. My son-in-law, Grant, my teenage grandkids, Aiden and Skylar, and even my biological son, Ethan, were all in on the joke. I stood there, leaning on my cane, my face burning with shame as other wealthy patrons glanced over. The huge crystal fixtures cast a golden glow on the crisp white tablecloths and shiny silverware, but I felt a chill spread through my chest like liquid nitrogen. My name is Rose. I'm 67 years old, and I adopted Shelby exactly 30 years ago when she was a little tyke of 8. 3 decades of pouring in love, support, and every dime I had, just to be treated like some random outsider by my own family. The only person who looked uncomfortable was my lifelong friend, Beth, sitting down at the end of the table with a look that mixed pure shock with total indignation. Our eyes met briefly, and in that split second, a silent connection passed between us, a complete understanding. Shelby, that wasn't cool, I said, keeping my voice low and composed, despite the pain that felt like a shrapnel wound in my heart. Oh geez, Mom, don't be so sensitive, Ethan chimed in, waving his hand dismissively. It's just a joke. You know how Shelby is. I knew exactly how Shelby was. At 38, she'd mastered the art of making me feel small while putting on a perfect show of the devoted daughter for the outside world. For 3 decades, I'd given her the best of the best: designer clothes, a first-rate education, and funding for every get-rich-quick scheme she ever tried. Meanwhile, Ethan, my 5-year-old biological son, got the same love and opportunities. The difference was that Ethan, despite his flaws, showed at least basic respect. Shelby, on the other hand, seemed to nurture a bitterness that grew with every year, as if my generosity was some kind of personal offense. That night's dinner was supposed to be a celebration for Shelby's newest venture, a high-end boutique that I'd helped bankroll with a $250,000 contribution, $250,000. I was always bailing Shelby out. When Ethan asked for a loan to expand his software company 2 years back, I gave him the same amount. The difference? He'd already started paying me back. The evening dragged on, with the conversations swirling all around me as if I were invisible. Shelby bragged about her new shipment of Italian threads. Aiden went on and on about his golf clinic. Grant discussed his promotion at the bank. When I tried to bring up the watercolor show I'd opened the week before a dream I pursued after retiring as a college professor, Skylar cut me off. That's neat, Grandma. Grant, tell us more about that trip to LA. Every word spoken, every look of indifference, every interruption felt like a tiny cut. By the time dessert hit the table, I had completely retreated. The familiar feeling of invisibility settled over my shoulders like a heavy coat. I felt like an inconvenient relic, only tolerated because I could still be a cash cow. That's when the waiter came over with the check, placing the fancy leather folder right in front of me. "What's this?" I asked, confused. Shelby's laugh sounded fake and cruel. "Oh, didn't we mention? You're picking up the tab tonight. After all, that's what grandmothers are for, right? Spoiling the family." Spoiling? The word came out almost choked. "I just dropped $250,000 on your new store 2 weeks ago. And now you can pay for our celebration dinner," Ethan finished. "It's not like you need the money, that huge house all to yourself, the cushy retirement." My hands shook as I opened the folder. The total made my eyes blur. $4,780. They'd ordered the most expensive wines, a slew of appetizers, the priciest entrees. Aiden had ordered 2 desserts just because he could. "I'm not paying for this," I said, closing the folder. Shelby's smug smile vanished instantly. Of course you are. You always pay. It's what mothers do. The tension at the table was thick as a New England fog. Beth, my friend of decades and the widow of a prominent Chicago businessman, watched the scene with sharp eyes. Even at 72, she had a commanding presence, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, her posture ramrod straight. "Not this time," I replied, handing the leather folder back to the waiter. "Just bring me the check for my plate and my drink, please." The waiter hesitated, nervously looking between me and Shelby. "Mom, don't be ridiculous," Shelby hissed, her beautiful face twisted into an ugly expression. "You always pay. It's what mothers do. Mothers support their kids, Shelby. But they aren't obligated to bankroll every one of their whims forever, especially when they're treated with disrespect." Grant cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Come on, Rose. It was just a joke. You don't have to make a scene." "A scene?" My voice came out louder than I intended. "You invite me to dinner, embarrass me in front of strangers, and then expect me to pay almost $5,000 for the privilege?" Ethan rolled his eyes. "Always the drama. That's why we'd rather go out without you." Those words hit me like a slap. It was true. They often met up without me, probably laughing at my expense while enjoying the comfort my money provided. "Just a sec, if you please." Quote. Beth's voice cut through the silence. She stood up, picking up her designer handbag. "Rose, that's enough. Let's bail. I've seen how they treat their mother, and this is completely unacceptable." "But Beth," Shelby immediately switched to a sweet tone. "The night's just getting started." Beth looked at Shelby with a chilling gaze. "I've seen plenty for tonight. You kids need a lesson in respecting your mother." I stood up too, feeling a rush of relief at not being alone. Beth and I had been tight since college. She knew my whole story. My marriage to Charlie, his early death when Ethan was only 15, and my decision to adopt Shelby a few years later to give Ethan a sister and give a home to a girl who desperately needed one. "You are going to regret this, Mom," Shelby said, the threat barely concealed in her voice. I faced my adopted daughter, this gorgeous, cruel woman who had become so different from the scared, hopeful kid I'd brought home 3 decades ago. "No, Shelby," I said. "For the first time in a long time, I don't think I will." As we left, I heard the chaos erupting behind us, the waiter insisting on payment, Shelby demanding he wait, Grant trying to calm things down. I didn't look back. The night air of Manhattan was cool and refreshing. I took a deep breath, feeling like I'd just busted out of an invisible prison that had been closing in on me for years. The scent of gardenias from a nearby park mixed with the smell of recent rain, creating a feeling of starting fresh. "You okay?" Beth asked, as we settled into her luxury SUV. The soft leather seats and the quiet of the vehicle formed a protective bubble against the outside world. "No," I answered honestly, "but I think I will be." Beth drove in silence for a few minutes before pulling up to a low-key cafe downtown. It was a cozy spot with soft yellow lights and gentle jazz music, the kind of atmosphere that invites heart to hearts. "The hard truth and the test. We need to talk, Rose," she finally said as we settled into a secluded booth. "What happened tonight wasn't the first time, was it?" Tears welled in my eyes. The lump in my throat felt as big as a baseball. "No, it's gotten worse over the last few years. Since you retired, since you became just a bank account instead of a respected professor," Beth finished, her voice firm. I nodded, feeling the truth of those words like a punch. In the 5 years since I left my position as a history professor at the university, the dynamic with my kids had radically changed. The requests for cash got more frequent, the respect less and less. "They treat me like I'm a senile old lady, Beth, like my only use is signing checks." Beth covered my hand with hers. Her skin was thin and marked with age spots, but her touch conveyed strength. "Rose, we've been friends for over 40 years. You were my rock when I lost my Anthony in Chicago. You helped me run his companies when I had zero clue what I was doing. I'll never forget that." I smiled faintly, remembering how I'd spent nights poring over accounting and business management textbooks to help Beth after her husband's sudden death. How we sat together until dawn, cracking codes and contracts and financial reports while she struggled with grief and uncertainty. "And now," she continued, her voice suddenly different, "it's my turn to return the favor. I'm sick, Rose." The world seemed to stop around me. The sounds of the cafe, the clinking of cups, the low murmur of conversations, the soft music, everything vanished, replaced by a dull ringing in my ears. What? No. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. I found out 3 months ago. The docs gave me less than a year. Beth's revelation hit me like an iceberg. My friend, my pillar of strength for so many years, was dying. The cafe kept moving around us. Waiters served tables. Customers chatted. Life went on normally while my own world shattered. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Beth offered a sad smile, the kind that carries the wisdom of someone who's made peace with the inevitable. "Because I needed to put my affairs in order first, and because I wanted to be sure of a few things." "What things?" "About how your kids treat you, about how you've been living." She took a sip of her tea, her eyes never leaving mine. "I've been watching from afar for years, seeing how Shelby and Ethan gradually changed, how they went from being loving children to adults who seemed to only see you as a means to their ends." I couldn't deny her words. The change had been slow, almost unnoticeable, like water wearing down a rock over decades. Little snubs that got bigger, calls that became less frequent unless they needed something, impatient looks when I talked about my own interests. "It's not that bad." I tried to defend myself, more out of habit than true belief. "It is," Beth countered, raising a silver eyebrow. "Rose, you were just publicly humiliated by your own daughter. They expected you to pay almost $5,000 for a dinner where you were treated like an intruder. That's financial and emotional abuse." Her words hit me with the weight of a truth I'd been avoiding. For years I'd made excuses for their behavior. Ethan was stressed with work. Shelby had insecurities about being adopted. They just didn't realize how their words affected me. "What do you want me to do?" I asked, suddenly feeling very old and drained. "They're my kids, and I love them." Quote, "I know." Beth leaned forward, her eyes intense. "But love doesn't mean letting them walk all over you. Sometimes love means setting boundaries, and sometimes it means consequences." She opened her expensive leather clutch and pulled out a heavy envelope, placing it on the table between us. The paper was thick, sealed with the emblem of a famous law firm. "What's this?" "My will," Beth simply replied, "and a proposal." I looked at her, completely bewildered. Beth smiled, a mix of sorrow and resolve. "Rose, when Anthony died in Chicago, you taught me to be strong. You showed me how to run his companies, how not to let the male execs belittle me. You helped me turn a prosperous business into an empire." It was true. What started as a mid-sized import company under Anthony's management had, under Beth's leadership, become one of the largest business conglomerates in the Midwest, with stakes in logistics, tech, and retail. "The companies are worth almost $2 billion now," Beth continued, "and I don't have kids to leave them to." I swallowed, starting to grasp where she was going with this. The cafe seemed to shrink around us, as if the rest of the world had disappeared. "Beth, no. I always planned on leaving everything to you," she continued, ignoring my interruption. "You're the sister I never had, but after seeing how your kids treat you, I'm afraid they'd just blow it all. Not just the money, but the legacy I built." "What exactly are you proposing?" I asked, a mixture of dread and curiosity bubbling inside me. Beth pushed the envelope toward me. "Open it." With trembling fingers, I opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of legal documents. The words swam before my eyes. As I read, my breathing grew shallow. "It's a kind of game," Beth explained while I tried to process the paper's contents. "A test for your children and for you too." Quote, "The will named me as the primary heir to Beth's entire estate, with one hitch. Over the next 6 months, I had to establish rock-solid boundaries with my kids. No more money, no more favors, no more allowing abuse. If I managed to hold those boundaries until the trial period ended, the inheritance would be confirmed. If you cave, if you give in to their demands, if you go back to the old ways, everything goes to charity. Not a cent for you, and not one for them." "Kai, why do this?" I asked, stunned. "Because you deserve more than being a walking ATM for ungrateful kids. Because I want my money to go to someone who values it and uses it wisely. And," her voice softened, "I want the months I have left to see you reclaim your dignity and strength." I looked at my friend, this extraordinary woman who, even facing her own death, was more worried about my well-being. "And what if they change?" I asked. "What if they realize their mistakes?" Beth's smile was both hopeful and skeptical. then they'll finally be worthy of you. But Rose, you have to be ready for the possibility that they won't change, that when the gravy train runs dry, they'll show you who they really are. I felt the weight of that moment, the choice laid out before me. Continue as I was funding disrespect and abuse, or set boundaries and potentially lose the relationship with my children. I'm not sure I can do this, I confessed. You can, Beth said with conviction. The same woman who faced widowhood at 37, who raised a son alone, who adopted an 8-year-old girl when everyone said it was crazy, who became one of the most respected professors at the university. That woman can do anything. The line in the sand. When I got home that night, I found 3 voicemails. One from Shelby, one from Ethan, and one from Grant. All of them were livid, demanding an explanation for my shameful behavior at the restaurant. None of them mentioned who had paid the bill. Instead of calling them back right away, I sat on the back patio of my house. It was a spacious property in one of the best areas of Brooklyn Heights, bought with my own savings after decades of hard work. The yard, with its perfectly kept garden, glowed softly under the moonlight. This place had always been my safe haven. I thought about how I'd gotten here. After Charlie's death, so young, only 42, a sudden heart attack, I found myself alone with a teenage son and an uncertain future. Instead of falling apart, I threw myself into my job. I channeled my pain into purpose, becoming one of the most dedicated professors at the university, climbing the academic ladder while raising Ethan. Adopting Shelby was a decision many questioned. A single woman of 37, already with a 5-year-old son, adopting an 8-year-old girl with a history of neglect seemed like a recipe for disaster. But I saw her in that orphanage with her big, hopeful, scared eyes, and I knew she was my daughter. The early years were tough but rewarding. Shelby had nightmares and moments of anger, deep-seated insecurities. But she also had a laugh that could light up a room, a sharp mind, and a fierce determination. As for Ethan, after some initial resistance, he became a protective older brother. When did everything change? There was no single moment, just a slow, gradual erosion. Ethan graduated, started his career, got married, and had kids. Shelby followed a more chaotic path, dropping out of college, a string of failed relationships, and starting and closing several businesses. And at some point, both began to see me less as a person and more as a resource. My phone vibrated again. It was Shelby. "Mom, answer the darn phone. We need to talk about this ridiculous stunt." I took a deep breath and made my decision. Beth was right. It was time to draw the line. I wrote a single text and sent it to both kids. "I'll be available for a civil conversation tomorrow at 3 p.m. at my place. No yelling, no accusations. I have some changes to communicate." I shut my phone off completely. After that, something I'd never done before. The silence that followed was both terrifying and incredibly freeing. The next morning, when I turned the phone back on, I found dozens of texts, each one more outraged than the last. I ignored them all and spent the day preparing for the confrontation. At 2:55 p.m., the doorbell rang. Shelby was there, looking impeccable as always in her designer gear, but with dark circles under her eyes that suggested a restless night. Behind her, Ethan looked equally tired, a rare untidiness in his usually buttoned-up appearance. To my surprise, Grant was also there, looking distinctly uncomfortable. "Come in," I said calmly, leading them to the living room where I'd set out tea. "What the heck was that last night?" Shelby started immediately, completely ignoring my request for civility. "Shelby," I said, keeping my voice steady, "if you can't speak with respect, this conversation ends now." Quote. She blinked, surprised by my tone. How long had I allowed them to treat me this way without any pushback? "You left us hanging with a check for almost $5,000. "A check you ran up," I countered. "For a dinner you invited me to where I was humiliated and then expected to pay for." "It was just a joke, Mom," Ethan intervened, using his reasonable business-closing tone. "Shelby didn't mean that about important people." "It wasn't just last night," I continued. "It's been a pattern. You treat me like a bank, not a mother, like a wallet, not a person." Grant cleared his throat. "Rose, I think you're blowing this a little out of proportion." "I am not, Grant, and I didn't ask for your opinion." My direct response surprised him as much as it did me. It was as if a new Rose was emerging, someone I'd forgotten existed. "What is going on with you?" Shelby asked, her voice a mix of irritation and a hint of genuine concern. Is it Beth? Is she putting ideas in your head? Don't blame Beth because you have to pay your own bills, I replied. And no, it's not her. It's me, finally owning up to a truth I ignored for too long. I took a sip of tea, gathering my thoughts. The jasmine scent from the cup solidified my resolve. As of today, there are going to be some changes. First, no more money, no loans, no investments in new businesses, no financial help of any kind. The silence that followed was absolute. All three stared at me as if I'd just announced I was joining the circus. Shelby's expression bounced between disbelief and outrage, while Ethan looked like he was trying to run the numbers to see if I was serious. You can't be serious, Ethan finally said. I am completely serious. You're adults. Ethan's 45, Shelby 38, Grant 42. It's time you lived within your own means. Shelby shot up, her chair scraping on the hardwood floor with a sharp screech. This is nuts. I just opened the boutique. I need working capital. You promised you'd help me. I already gave you $250,000, I reminded her. Use it wisely. Mom, Ethan tried, using his most rational tone. I get that you're upset about last night, but this is an overreaction. Families help each other. Yes, they do, I agreed, but not one-sidedly. When was the last time one of you helped me? When was the last time you genuinely asked how I was? When did you visit without asking for something in return? Their faces told the whole story. A long time ago, the silence after my words was heavy and awkward. Shelby crossed her arms, her eyes glinting with rage and panic. Ethan ran a hand through his graying temples, a gesture he inherited from his father. Grant just looked lost, like he'd been dragged into a family fight he wasn't ready for. Is this some kind of midlife crisis? Shelby finally asked, her voice sharp. You're turning 68 inches 2 months and suddenly decide to cut off your own kids. I'm not cutting you off, I replied calmly. I'm cutting off the money. There's a big difference. To you, maybe, Shelby snapped back. But what am I supposed to do with the boutique now? I have expenses, suppliers to pay. Do what other entrepreneurs do. Seek bank financing, cut costs, hustle harder. I kept my voice firm. It is no longer my responsibility to prop up your ventures. Ethan, always more strategic than his sister, switched tactics. Mom, we're worried about you. This behavior isn't normal. You're always so generous, so available to us. And I am still emotionally available, I clarified. You can call me, visit me, talk, just don't ask for money anymore. It's that old lady, Shelby said suddenly, her eyes narrowed. Beth's behind this, isn't she? What did she offer you? I felt at you. It was incredible how fast Shelby could sniff out the source of a potential advantage or threat. Her instinct for opportunity had always been sharp. Beth has nothing to do with my decisions. I lied, partially. Her influence was there, but the final decision had been mine. This is between us. Grant, who had been quiet, finally spoke. Rose, I think what Shelby and Ethan are trying to say is that this change seems very sudden. Yesterday you were your usual self. Today you seem like a different person. Maybe I always was this person, Grant, I replied, looking him in the eye. Maybe I just lost my way for a while, trying to buy your love. Buy our love? Michael seemed truly offended. That's not fair, Mom. Isn't it? I leaned forward. When was the last time one of you came to visit me without asking for something in return? When was the last time you called me just to see how I was? When did you attend one of my watercolor shows? When did you offer to help with something? None of them answered. They didn't need to. We all knew the answer. Here's the deal, I continued after a few moments. I'm here as your mother. I want to have a relationship with you, with my grandkids, but the ATM is officially closed. Quote, Shelby stood up abruptly, her chair scraping on the hardwood floor with a sharp screech. You are going to regret this when you need us. And you will need us. You're getting old. We'll see if your pride is worth it. It's not pride, Shelby. It's self-respect. She grabbed her designer handbag and stormed toward the door. Come on, Grant, we're done here. Grant hesitated, looking torn for a brief second. I thought I saw a flash of respect in his eyes before he followed his wife. Ethan remained seated, watching me with an expression I couldn't read. The room was now wrapped in a disturbing silence, broken only by the ticking of the antique grandfather clock that had belonged to my parents. Do you also think I'm wrong? I asked after the front door closed with Shelby and Grant's departure. My son sighed deeply. I don't know what to think, Mom. This is unexpected. Life sometimes is. He stood up slowly. I need to process all of this. Shelby is going to be furious for weeks. Probably, I agreed. At the door, he stopped and turned. Are you okay? Really? It was the first genuine question about my well-being he had asked in months, maybe years. I felt a small, fragile pang of hope. I'm finding my way, I answered honestly. The consequences, and a new chance. After Ethan left, I sat alone in the silent living room, trembling slightly. I had done it, set clear boundaries, refused to be used again. The feeling was simultaneously terrifying and liberating. My phone rang. It was Beth. How'd it go? She asked without preamble. As well as could be expected, I replied. Shelby left furious. Ethan is confused. I think I lost my children today. Maybe, Beth said softly. You just gave them the chance to become the people they were always meant to be. The following weeks were a strange kind of silence. No calls from Shelby, no texts except a brief note from Ethan asking if I had come to my senses. I didn't answer. Instead, I used the time to rediscover myself. I dedicated myself more to my watercolors, visited old friends I'd neglected, and joined a book club at the local library. And I spent time with Beth, whose days were visibly numbered now. Her face had grown thinner, her body more fragile, but her eyes kept that fierce intensity. Then, at the start of the 4th week after our confrontation, I got an unexpected call. It was Skylar's school, my 5-year-old granddaughter. Mrs. Rose, Skylar is here in the nurse's office. She passed out during PE and asked us to call you instead of her parents. I found Skylar sitting in a chair in the school nurse's office, looking small and vulnerable in her crumpled uniform. Her pale face brightened slightly when she saw me. Grandma, she said, her voice faint. I sat beside her, taking her cold, trembling hands in mine. What happened, sweetie? The nurse approached. She fainted during gym class. Her blood pressure is low, and she admitted she hasn't been eating well. Not eating? I looked at my granddaughter, now noticing the thinness of her face, the dark circles under her eyes. How had I not seen this before? Can we talk privately? Skylar asked, looking nervously at the nurse. The professional nodded understandingly. I'll give you a few minutes. When the door closed, Skylar burst into silent tears. Everything's a mess, Grandma. Everything. I put my arm around her shoulders. She seemed to have lost weight since the last time I saw her. Tell me what's going on. Mom and Dad are fighting all the time, she explained between sobs. Since that night at the restaurant, it's just screaming. The store's doing terrible. Mom says it's your fault for not giving her more cash. Dad says she needs to grow up and learn to run a real business. My heart squeezed. I'm so sorry you're going through this. Skylar wiped her tears with her uniform sleeve. There's barely any food at home now. Mom's putting all the money into the store. She said we have to save, that we're in survival mode because of what you did. The guilt hit me like a wave. Were my boundaries hurting my innocent grandkids? Then I realized it wasn't my boundaries doing this, but Shelby's reaction to them. She was choosing to prioritize her failing business over the well-being of her own children. Did you eat today? I asked. She shook her head. We're gonna fix this right now. I stood up, determined. First, we're getting lunch. Then, I'm talking to the nurse and taking you home with me for the day. Skylar's eyes widened. Mom's going to flip out. Quote, let me handle your mother. After a good lunch at a nearby diner, where Skylar devoured a full plate like she hadn't eaten in days, I called Shelby. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice instantly defensive. What do you want now? Skylar is with me, I informed her calmly. She passed out at school today due to a lack of proper nutrition. Silence on the other end. Then, what are you implying? I'm not implying anything, Shelby. I'm stating a fact. Skylar is staying with me tonight. Tomorrow, I'd like you and Grant to come over for dinner to talk. I don't need your parenting lectures, Shelby hissed. This isn't about you or me, I replied firmly. It's about Skylar and Aiden. If you truly care about your children, you'll be here tomorrow at 7 p.m. The real test. To my surprise, Shelby showed up the next night with Grant and Aiden. My grandson, usually confident and cocky like his father, looked tired and disheveled. The family tension was clearly taking its toll on both teens. I cooked a simple but hearty dinner. During the meal, the atmosphere was tense and silent until Shelby finally put her fork down hard. "So, this is what we're here for you to show off how you can feed our kids better than us?" "We're here," I replied calmly, "because your children are suffering, and we need to find a solution." "The solution is obvious," Shelby retorted. "Stop this little tantrum about money and help us like you always did." Aiden, to my surprise, interrupted. "Mom, it's not Grandma's fault that you don't know how to manage money." The silence that followed was cutting. Shelby looked at her son as if he'd just slapped her. "How dare you talk to me like that?" "It's true," Aiden continued, apparently letting loose pent-up frustration. "Grandma gave you $250,000, and in less than a month, you're already broke. You bought that ridiculously expensive Italian inventory that no one wants. You rented the most expensive space at the mall, and now we're the ones suffering." Grant cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Aiden, respect your mother. And you?" Aiden turned to his father. "You just complain, but you don't do anything to help. At least Uncle Ethan is trying to keep his own business afloat without whining for Grandma's money." Skylar, silent until then, finally spoke. "I just want you guys to stop fighting. I just want to be able to sleep at night without hearing screaming." Shelby's face crumpled, the mask of indignation giving way to something more vulnerable. For a moment, I saw a flash of the 8-year-old girl I'd brought home all those decades ago. "I'm trying," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm trying to keep everything running. Alone," I added softly. "Just like you always tried to do everything alone, even when I offered real help, not just money." Shelby looked up at me, confused. "What do you mean? How many times did I offer to teach you about financial planning, about how to run a business? You always refused, preferring the easy way out, just asking for more money when things got tough." Grant surprised everyone by speaking up. "She's right, Van. Your mom tried to teach you to fish, but you only wanted the fish already cooked." Quote. Grant's comment dropped like a bomb on the table. Shelby whirled to face him, betrayed by her own husband. For a tense moment, I thought she was going to explode. But then something unexpected happened. Her shoulders slumped, and she covered her face with her hands. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted, her voice muffled. "I never did." It was a moment of vulnerability so rare that no one at the table initially knew how to react. Skylar timidly reached out and touched her mother's arm. Aiden, despite his earlier outburst, looked awkward seeing his always strong mother suddenly break down. "Shelby?" I spoke softly. "The problem was never a lack of ability. You're smart, determined, charismatic. The problem was always that you never truly had to try because I was always there to fix every mistake with more money." She uncovered her face, her eyes red. "And now you've taken away the safety net." "Yes," I confirmed, "because I believe you can fly without it." Grant spoke up, surprising me again. "Rose is right, Van. We need to figure this out ourselves as a family." I looked at my son-in-law with new respect. Maybe there was more to him than the complacent man he always showed off. "What do you suggest then?" Shelby asked, sounding genuinely lost. "First," I replied, "the kids move into my house temporarily until you stabilize the situation at your place. No arguments, no deprivations." To my surprise, Shelby didn't protest. "Second," I continued, "I won't give any more money, but I can offer something more valuable. Knowledge. I will help you analyze the business, restructure it, make it viable as a mentor, not an investor." "You're not a businesswoman," Shelby pointed out, a trace of her usual mistrust. "No," I agreed, "but I've been best friends with one of the most successful businesswomen in Chicago for over 40 years. I picked up a few things. The mention of Beth made Shelby frown, but she didn't comment. "And third," I concluded, "all of us need to relearn how to be a family not based on money or expectations, but on mutual respect and genuine love." The reading of the will. The following days established a new routine. Aiden and Skylar moved into my guest rooms, visibly thriving in a tension-free environment. I began working with Shelby on the boutique, digging through her chaotic finances, identifying key errors, and developing a recovery plan. To my amazement, when stripped of her defensiveness, Shelby proved to be an eager learner. I realized that beneath the entitlement and resentment, there was an intelligent woman who had never truly been challenged to grow. "Why didn't you ever force me to learn this before?" she asked me one day while we were reviewing the projected cash flow. "Because you were never ready to listen," I replied honestly. "And because I was too busy trying to buy your love to truly help you." Shelby paused, absorbing my words. "I always loved you," she finally said, "even in the moments when I treated you badly." "I know," I replied, "but I don't think you ever learned to respect me." She didn't answer, but her silence was powerful. Ethan reappeared in my life 3 weeks after our initial confrontation. He came alone, without his wife, without the defensive posture he'd adopted earlier. "I hear you're helping Shelby with the boutique," he said, accepting a cup of coffee. "I'm trying," I confirmed. "And how are you?" Ethan sighed deeply. "Good. To be honest, your ultimatum made me rethink some things. I realized I was on the path to becoming as dependent as Shelby." He hesitated. Then he added, "I also realized that I barely know my own mother. Who are you besides the person who was always there to financially support us?" The question caught me off guard. "I'm many things, Ethan. A professor, an artist, a friend, a woman who found her own strength after being widowed at 37. Someone who loves history and literature and long walks at sunrise. I'd like to get to know that person better," he said with a shy smile. The weeks turned into months. Beth's test, maintaining firm boundaries for 6 months, was halfway through when her health drastically worsened. She was admitted to the best hospital in Manhattan. I visited her daily, watching with a heavy heart as she faded. Her body might be failing, but her mind remained sharp as a tack. "How are things with Shelby?" she asked on a particularly tough afternoon, her voice barely a whisper. "Surprisingly well," I replied, holding her frail hand. "The boutique is starting to stabilize." She cut the rent by moving to a smaller space, renegotiated with suppliers. She's learning to manage a budget. Beth smiled weakly. "And Ethan? He's paying back the loan he took from me, even though I told him it's no longer necessary. He says it's a matter of principle now. The grandkids are still with me, but they visit their parents regularly. The house is calmer. Grant is more present. They're slowly rebuilding." Beth squeezed my hand with the little strength she had left. "You're passing the test brilliantly, Rose." "It's no longer about the test or the money," I confessed. "It's about finally having real relationships with my kids." "That was the real test," Beth whispered. "It always was." Beth passed away on a quiet Sunday morning 3 weeks later. She slipped away in her sleep, without pain, just as she'd hoped. I was by her side, having spent the night in the hospital. I held her hand until the end, silently grateful for decades of true friendship. The funeral was a grand event, as expected for one of Chicago's most influential women business leaders, politicians, major social figures. Everyone came to pay their respects. Amid that crowd of power and influence, I noticed Shelby and Ethan in the back, both clearly uncomfortable, present more out of obligation than genuine respect. The reading of the will took place a week later. William Miller, Beth's longtime lawyer, conducted the meeting in his firm's office. To everyone's surprise, the entire family was invited. Me, Shelby, and Grant, Ethan and his wife, even my teenage grandkids. Before starting, William formally announced, "Beth requested that this video be shown." Beth's image appeared on the large screen in the office. Despite being clearly weakened by the illness, she maintained that dignified posture and penetrating gaze that always defined her. "If you are seeing this, I have already departed from this world," she began. "But before revealing my final decisions, I want everyone to understand the reason for them." Beth looked directly at the camera. "I spent the last months of my life observing how the family of my dear friend Rose treated her. I saw people who should love and respect her, treating her like a walking ATM. I saw the humiliation at the Gilded Spoon. I heard the calls demanding money. I witnessed the indifference to her feelings and accomplishments." Shelby shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Ethan stared at the floor. "Particularly you, Shelby," Beth continued, as if she could see her right then. "The girl Rose took in and loved as a daughter transformed into an adult who treats her adoptive mother with calculated cruelty. Not only do you constantly demand money, but you seem to enjoy diminishing her." Shelby's face flushed with shame and anger. "And you, Ethan, perhaps you are not so openly cruel, but your indifference and willingness to exploit your mother's generosity are equally reprehensible." After a dramatic pause, Beth smiled. So, I decided to intervene. I proposed a test to Rose to establish clear boundaries with you for 6 months. If she succeeded, she would inherit my fortune. But the real test was not for her. It was for you. The silence in the room was absolute. All eyes were fixed on the screen. Rose, my dear friend, Beth continued with a softer voice, you passed the test with flying colors. You reclaimed your dignity, your self-respect. As for the others, her gaze hardened. Well, the results speak for themselves. William turned off the video and picked up a document. The will is quite clear. The entirety of Beth Campus's estate companies, investments, and properties valued at approximately $2 billion is left to Rose Mendoza. Shelby gasped audibly. Ethan turned pale. Is there more? William continued. Beth established separate trust funds for each family member, but with specific conditions. He turned to Shelby. For you, Shelby, a fund of $5 million, accessible only after 5 years of proven work at a non-profit organization of your choice at minimum wage. No money from Rose can be used during this period. Shelby rose furiously. This is ridiculous. She can't do that. She can indeed, William replied calmly. And she did. Quote, for Ethan, he continued, a similar fund, but with the condition that he work for 3 years as a teacher in an underserved public school. Ethan was speechless. But my company, as for the grandchildren, William proceeded, ignoring him, each will receive a generous educational fund, accessible directly at age 18 without parental intervention. Grant, who had remained silent, finally spoke. And me? William consulted the documents. You have the option to remain with Shelby during her period of community service or divorce, with a compensation of $200,000. Chaos erupted in the room. Shelby was screaming accusations. Ethan was arguing about the injustice. Grant seemed to be calculating his options. Only my grandchildren remained silent, perhaps secretly relieved to have their future secured, regardless of their parents' choices. I stood up calmly. Enough. To my surprise, everyone quieted down. Beth left me not only her fortune, but also the power to modify these conditions. I will be using it. Shelby immediately adopted a conciliatory tone. Mom, you know we love you. That thing at the restaurant was just a stupid joke. I raised my hand, cutting her off. The conditions remain, with one alteration. If you complete your respective periods of service with sincerity and dedication, you will not only receive the trust funds, but you will also be reinstated as heirs to a portion of what now belongs to me. Everyone's eyes widened at the possibility of financial redemption. But, I continued, my voice now steel, if you choose to contest the will, if you try legal maneuvers, or if you revert to past behavior, even that offer will be withdrawn. Quote, the true revenge. 6 months later, to my surprise, both Shelby and Ethan had accepted the conditions. Shelby was working at a nonprofit for needy children, using her fashion skills to teach sewing and design to teenagers. Ethan was teaching math and computer science at a public school, discovering a talent for education he never knew he possessed. Grant had opted for the divorce, choosing the cash over a marriage that was already beyond repair. Aiden and Skylar were thriving under my partial care, visiting their parents regularly and witnessing their transformations. On my 70th birthday, I received an unexpected gift, a photo album put together by Shelby, documenting her work with the kids. On the last page, a simple note, thank you for forcing me to find the person I can be instead of the one I became. The lesson was hard but necessary. I'm starting to understand the value of what you and Beth did. With love and newfound respect, Shelby. Looking out the window at the sunset over my garden, I silently raised a glass in honor of my late friend. Well played, Beth, I whispered. Well played. Perhaps, I thought as I closed Shelby's album, the true revenge wasn't destruction, but transformation. Beth had understood that perfectly. By using her fortune not only as a reward, but as a tool for change, she had given all of us a second chance not to pretend the past didn't happen, but to build a better future from its harsh lessons. Sometimes the truest love isn't in giving everything someone asks for, but in having the courage to say no when necessary. It took almost losing everything and gaining $2 billion for me to learn that lesson. But in the end, I won something much more valuable. a family that was finally learning the meaning of respect and true love. Now, if you dug this story, click on the next video popping up on your screen because it's got a tale of betrayal and revolt like you've never seen before.